All right, chat. Today, I'm not gonna lie, Barney linked this video. It says why islands turn animals into giants. We watched a little bit of it. I'm not gonna lie. I mean, this is something newer on the channel, so make sure to subscribe. Come through to the Twitch, StoryofMike with 2 eyes. But let's see what this video is about.
Let's imagine it's the dead of night, and you're on some remote island just minding your own business, when suddenly you hear something rustling through your camp, and you grab your flashlight expecting maybe a rat or a lost seabird. But what you find defies your expectations, as instead you see a crab the size of a garbage can lid with claws that could snap your hand like a pretzel stick, just casually attempting to steal your cooking pot.
Yo,
And the worst part,
what?
This isn't even unusual here. Welcome
That's a crab?
to the unhinged world of island gigantism. Now, you might think being stuck on an island would make things smaller, considering how there's less food, less space, and fewer resources.
Yeah.
And that makes sense and all, but that's not how
No
it
way,
really
that's
works.
real.
At least, not all the time. As sometimes evolution does the exact opposite, making small things giant, or big things even bigger.
Okay.
And so, give an animal a few thousand years of isolation on some random island, and suddenly you've got rats the size of house cats, insects that could probably arm wrestle you, and giant crabs that have literally evolved to climb trees.
That just doesn't look like a crab. Like, that just doesn't look like a
and
crab.
smash open coconuts. And scientists call this phenomena the island rule, or if you're feeling fancy, Foster's rule, after the
Okay.
biologist J. Bristol Foster, who first described this madness in 1964. And what Foster basically discovered was that islands are where nature goes to beta test its weirdest ideas. And like every beta test, these ideas don't always work out. And one test that obviously
Put me
failed
on the
is an
island
animal
and-
so famous
Bro,
that we
what?
often think of it as the poster child for extinction, the dodo bird. But what most people
dodo
don't know is
bird.
that the dodo, i.e. Raphis cucullatus, is actually a poster child of island gigantism as well. You see, this wasn't some weird unique bird lineage. He
was like a pigeon. I was about to
giant
say,
dodo
it's just a
but
pigeon.
nonetheless.
Okay.
Now, you might not be able to guess that just by looking at it, but the dodo does in fact belong to the pigeon and dove family, Columbidae. But while your average pigeon weighs maybe 300 grams and spends his time defecating on statues, the dodo was 17.5 kilograms or 39 pounds, a pure flightless pigeon. And in other words, 58 times heavier. It stood a little less than a meter or 3 feet tall, had wings that were basically decorative at that point, and a beak that had evolved from pecking seeds to mess around and find out. With one account saying word for word, their war weapon was the mouth, with which they could bite fiercely. So you might be thinking, why would a pigeon, a bird so impressive in flying and geonavigation that they've been used as a communication
Because they didn't
method
have to
for over
fly
1,000
anywhere.
years,
Yeah.
would just lose their ability to fly? And the answer is actually fairly simple. Mauritius, the island where they're from, has no native predators to worry about. And so the dodo simply had no reason to maintain the ability to fly, seeing that flying
So they
is
got
metabolically
fat.
expensive, requiring highly specialized
So the dodo
structures
birds
and
got
massive chest
fat. They
muscles.
didn't have to work
The
out.
dodo just stopped. It got fat, likely happy, and waddled around eating fruits and fallen
Yo, that's...
seeds like it owned the place. Which, to be fair, it kind of did.
I mean, yeah.
And so, the dodo's entire evolutionary strategy was pretty much be big and be fearless, which worked great for millions of years, until it didn't. You see, they were so unafraid that when Dutch sailors arrived in 1598, the dodos would literally just walk up to them to say hi, being their fat, happy self. But then, this proximity would also allow the sailors to club them to death if they so chose.
Bro,
to,
they just...
which,
man, they were just walking up to say hi, and y'all start killing them, bro?
They unfortunately did. A lot. And the last confirmed sighting was in
Yeah,
1662,
they got it. They were
less
extinct
than a century
long time
after
ago.
humans discovered the island.
Yeah.
With the dodos going from ruling an island paradise to being extinct so fast that for years afterwards, some even thought the stories were false, and that they were instead mythical animals.
Yeah.
Which we now of course know they're not, and are one of the best known extinct animals worldwide. But while everyone knows about the dodo, almost no one seems to know about its neighbor, the Rodriguez solitaire, scientifically known as Pezophax
So can this bird
solitarium.
fly?
And guess what? This wasn't just another giant bird, it was also another giant flightless pigeon that lived in Africa, specifically
Goodness.
on the Rodriguez Island, just 560 kilometers east of Mauritius, which also made it a relatively close cousin to the dodo. But here's the real kicker. It was even
Looks like
larger
a
than the
duck.
dodo. While the dodo was more round and chunky, the solitaire was tall and lean, with males standing up to 90
So why
centimeters
couldn't it
or
fly?
35 inches tall, and weighing up to 28 kilograms or 62
62
making
pounds?
them over 50% bigger than even dodos.
Tall and lean, but
on
they
top of
double
that,
the weight?
Sexual dimorphism
That's
was
muscle.
insane, with males being up to 66% heavier than the females, with them topping out at 17 kilograms. Which, to put that into perspective,
with long
would be like the
legs.
average American man now weighing 227 pounds or 103 kilograms. and making it the most extreme size difference between sexes in any neognathic bird ever. But here's where things get properly weird, or well, violent.
Okay.
While their wings, just like the dodo, had become useless for flight, they had evolved to become useful for another purpose entirely.
Fighting.
Chiefly as weapons.
Yep.
You see, both sexes had bony knobs in their wings that were the size of musket balls, being able to grow 3.3 centimeters or 1.3 inches across, which in case you're not a war historian, would be around the size of a ping pong ball. And as alluded to, these were not just for show, as the solitaire would
So
use
they
these
started
weaponized
fighting
wings
with them.
to beat the absolute HE double hockey stick out of their rivals.
Yo.
Winging them so fast and hard that contemporary accounts claimed it made it sound like thunder. And fossil records
started
certainly backs
boxing.
this up, with many solitaire wing bones showing signs of healed fractures, evidence of just how brutal these battles were. And while some have suggested that these fractures may be the result of a hereditary bone disease rather than battle wounds,
Yeah.
all extant birds, where carpal spurs and knobs are present, have used them as weapons literally without exception. And this would also make sense, considering unlike their peace-loving cousins, the Rodriguez solitaire evolved on an island that received significantly less rainfall.
Wait, so are they? I don't think they're extinct then if they can fight, right?
Mauritius, meaning resources were scarcer, which likely put evolutionary pressure of becoming extremely aggressive. Oh, and they also had a wicked bite. But unfortunately, similar to the dodo, they laid just one egg at a time, which isn't exactly great when it comes to species survivability. However, unlike the dodo's extinction, the solitaire lasted longer, but not by much,
so they're still
as by the
extinct.
mid-1700s, they were gone. So another giant pigeon deleted from existence, except this one went down swinging its ping pong ball fists, or rather wings. Now at this point, you're probably thinking that everything that becomes giant on an island is a bird. And you wouldn't exactly be wrong there, as there are plenty more examples of birds getting huge, even bigger than those I
10-foot
mentioned,
bird?
which we'll get to later. But mammals also got their fair share of gigantification as well. And nowhere is this more obvious than with rodents, as islands seem to have a particular talent for turning cute little mice and rats into absolute units that would make Tom and Garfield think twice. Take the Canary Islands, for example. These volcanic islands off the coast of Africa were once home to Canariamis bravoi, the Tenerife giant rat. And these things weren't just big, they were huge.
We learned about these because people brought ugly freaking dog. I hate this freaking dog.
They were huge.
I'm not even gonna lie. Like, I wasn't even gonna say nothing about this dog, bro. But like, I feel like everybody that has this dog in real life is annoying in some capacity. I swear, I know like 20 people that have this dog. I'm not even kidding, bro. I'm not even kidding. Not even kidding. It ran away. How you get this dog to run away?
In fact,
bro?
when we compare them to their closest mainland relatives,
the dog's annoying though, bro.
We find that these guys got over 5 times bigger, despite only diverging 650,000 years ago, which, just to put that into perspective, is about the same amount of time of divergence as Neanderthals and modern humans. And while Neanderthals are certainly absolute units,
think about it.
Imagine if they were the 900 pounds or 400 kilogram type of absolute units, as that's basically what the Tenerife giant rat is to the grass rat. And then there's the St. Kilda field mouse, Apodemus sylvaticus hortensis, which is basically evolution's attempt at speedrunning, insert gigantism. As what's interesting about these guys is that this isn't some ancient species that's had millions of years to get weird. In fact, it hasn't even had hundreds of thousands. This is a regular mouse that was brought to a windswept Scottish island maybe 1,000 years ago tops, and possibly by Vikings, because of course Vikings are involved somehow. And in just a millennium, which in evolutionary terms is basically yesterday, these mice have grown significantly larger than their mainland relatives, all the while being on an island which is basically Scotland's attempt at remaking Ireland. Just kidding. Being cold, wet, windy, and mostly grass. But for these mice, paradise.
Recent dinos did go extinct is because they didn't hide during the meteors. Like all these smaller animals were able to hide. Like, that's why dinos went extinct. They couldn't physically hide.
No cats, no
and the
rats,
smaller ones
no competition.
just died
just
out.
Them, the green outdoors, in 1,000 years to get progressively more chunky. However, with all this said, I will note that most cases of island gigantism do seem to happen in warmer environments. And if you were to, for some reason, become marooned on the island of Flores in Indonesia, let's just say, good luck, as this island seems to exist solely to make biologists question their sanity. And getting marooned here would suck for multiple reasons. You see, this is the exact same place where they found extinct humans. Humans known as Homo floresiensis.
Extinct
an
humans?
extinct cousin of ours who actually coexisted with humans for a hot sec. But these were no giants, instead being essentially dwarves who barely stood over a meter tall, or 3 foot 7 inches, experiencing something called island dwarfism, the second half of the island rule. And so if given a long
You
enough
asking
time,
too many
perhaps your
questions, man.
descendants would join them in short kingery, which didn't seem to fare well for our cousins. But even if you're only marooned for one generation, you're not out of the woods yet, as don't be mistaken in thinking this dwarfism applies to the rest of the animals as well, as while humans went small, others went big, including of course in typical fashion, the rats. Meet Papagomus armanville, also known as the Flores giant rat, which might sound like something out of a low-budget film.
Let's skip it. I don't
because
care
why
about
not?
that.
The largest carnivore on Flores is a monitor lizard too busy eating carrion to hunt a roided
Okay.
up master splinter.
So like,
But that's not to say they couldn't
yeah,
save that,
this is like
as
the
these
Komodo
monitor
dragon,
lizards
right?
Are really Varanus komodoensis,
Yeah.
i.e. the Komodo dragon, the largest lizard on Earth. Now,
So
for a
like the
long
lizard
time,
from
these
Jesse.
guys have been considered a textbook example of island gigantism, seeing that they live on islands and are, well, giant, weighing up to 150 kilograms or 330 pounds, and measuring up to 3 meters or 10 feet long. However, recent research has shown that these guys likely descended from an already giant monitor lizard that evolved in Australia,
Yeah.
which in turn means their size is through something called phyletic gigantism, which is basically when a whole lineage just trends toward becoming absolute units, as opposed to purely the island
Units.
making it big. But, and this is the
It's like,
important
why do you
part,
need a 300
island life let it
300
stay big.
pound pet?
Everywhere
bro?
else, giant monitor lizards went extinct, be it competition from other predators, climate change, or just humans with pointy sticks. But on Flores, and a handful of other Indonesian islands, there are no big cats, no bears, no wolves, etc. So being
They
a
are the
3-meter long
big
lizard with
animals.
toxic drool and a monopoly on being terrifying is just perfect. And considering their origins in Australia, it might not surprise you to hear that there are islands here which have also been inflicted with the insanity that is island gigantism.
Yeah.
And when I say islands, I'm talking about New Zealand, which technically is an island part of the Australian continent. Now, New Zealand is basically what happens when you take an island, remove all
Oceania,
mammals and
Australia.
bats, and then let evolution go off its medication. And the results are exactly as insane as you'd expect. No pun intended. Let's start with the living nightmare that is the giant weta, which are specifically species in the genus Dinocrita. These things moas, especially the giant moas, who evolved
We gotta skip some of these. I
Herbivorous
can't even
mammals.
hold you.
Except, of course, they were birds that stood up to 3.6 meters tall, or 12 feet, and weighed up to
Okay,
278
12 feet,
kilograms, or
600
613
pounds.
And in a very unusual case, not only were these guys just flightless and giant, but they actually had no wings, not even
No
vestigial
wings.
ones. There was no humerus, no radius, no ulna, and no carpals, with
So they just
basically
got
the
no
entire upper
arms.
limb being absent from skeletons. The only thing there was a tiny finger-sized scapula coracoid, a fused remnant
Goodness,
of the
Calvin.
forelimbs girdles coracoid and scapula. And I can't emphasize enough how unusual this is, because out of literally every other flightless bird, dead or alive, the moas are the only ones completely lacking wings.
That makes sense.
So in other
yeah.
words, they were basically feathered giraffes that forgot they were supposed to be birds. But, despite their sizes, they were not the kings. As
Yeah,
hunting
I
these
mean,
walking
obviously, they don't have any
skyscrapers
arms to
was
protect them.
Hyraetus murray, better known as Haast's eagle. And let's just say,
So
if you're
bigger
hunting
eagle.
Big Bird's cousin, you better be big yourself. And they were. Not only were they giant for an eagle, they are in fact the largest eagle that ever lived.
What, 6
period,
feet tall?
and could weigh up to 40 pounds or 18 kilograms, while having a wingspan reaching 10 feet or 3 meters.
10 feet wingspan.
And while that might not sound huge, you have to keep
That-
in
that's
mind the
wimpy.
fact that of the largest extant eagles, none have been verified to exceed 9 kilograms or 20 pounds in the wild, meaning even the largest are about twice as small as Haast's eagles. And yet, wild eagles of that much smaller size can still kill deer, antelope, and sometimes even wolves,
Yeah.
with their prey often weighing many times their size. And so unsurprisingly, these absolute
The
units of an
Haast
eagle
eagles
were
are
giant
freaking
killers,
crazier.
having talons that were literally the size of tiger claws. And they put those to good use, hunting prey the size of cows, likely diving at speeds that would let it strike with enough force to break bones. And based off of the Maori stories of the Poakai, a
Like a
monstrous
10
bird from their
foot
legends and stories,
wingspan.
these eagles likely turn these weapons against the human invaders, too.
Like,
which
I
in turn
think I
these-
have like a 7-foot wingspan. Like, a 10-foot wingspan. Like, my camera's set up kind of weird, but like a 10-foot wingspan is so crazy. It's so crazy
Zealand
to
about
think
700
about.
years ago. But unfortunately, these humans proved too much in the end, leading to the extinction of the moas, which in turn led to the gradual extinction of the biggest eagle this planet
I'm
has
noticing a
ever seen.
pattern, bro.
But while the moas and Haast eagles are gone, New Zealand still has one absolutely ridiculous yet
Spider,
adorable
right?
bird
It's like a
bumbling around,
tarantula.
the kakapo,
Oh, okay.
scientifically known as Strigops habroptilus. And this guy isn't just ridiculous looking. is like in typical island gigantism fashion, they are
So
big,
he don't have
with them
arms
actually
either?
being the world's largest parrot, with males weighing up to 3 kilograms or 6.6 pounds, and
Heavy
measuring up to
bird,
64
heavy
centimeters
parrot.
or 25 inches long, meaning about twice the size of the next largest parrot, the hyacinth macaw. And beyond its size, it's basically everything a parrot shouldn't be. It can't fly, it's nocturnal, and is the only
Why
parrot in the
can't none of
world
these
that uses a
fly,
erect breeding
bro?
system, which, in case you don't know what that is basically equivalent to guys at a frat party, being a mating system where males gather in a specific region to quote-unquote display for females, who then choose a mate based on the best of these displays. And just like a frat party again, these guys smell, but perhaps a bit better, being described as a combination of honey, papaya, which in case you didn't know, both tastes and smells like vomit, and I quote, musty, violent cases. So certainly unique scent in any case. And the smell is actually so strong that predators can easily track them by scent alone from far distances, which is a terrible evolutionary strategy.
Imagine getting
when you
caught
can't
because
fly.
you smell
But perhaps the
nasty,
only thing
bro.
worse than that is what they do when they decide to breed. As you see, those displays I was talking about earlier basically consist of the kakapo singing the song of its people to as many things as it can, or at least as long as it can distance-wise. What happens is that males create these elaborate bowl-shaped depressions in the ground, which basically act as acoustic amplifiers, and they then proceed to sit in these bowls and produce
And
a
just
deep
start
booming
yelling.
sound that's so low frequency that it can travel 5 kilometers or 3.1 miles through dense forest. And just as a cherry on top, they do this for 6 to 8 hours every single night for up to 4
Goodness.
months.
Talk
Meaning
about jobless.
960 hours of booming per mating season. So they better hope it turns to banging with all that effort they're putting in. Pun intended. But the ingenuity of the low frequency is also a problem. Kind
Okay.
of. Is while the low frequency itself means it carries for longer, it also makes it so that females cannot always accurately tell which direction it's coming from.
Where they're
So
actually.
in other words, you basically have males crying their hearts out for their Juliet, while the females are just wandering around the forest like, where the heck is that coming from? And probably also, how do I shut him, the HE double hockey stick, up? And it gets worse, as at least some of the males are desperate enough during mating season to try mating with pretty much anything, including people's
Humans.
heads, whether being famous,
What?
or perhaps infamous, footage of a kakapo named Sirocco attempting to mate with zoologist Mark Carwadine's head. Yeah. And since then, scientists have even built a special ejaculation helmet to help collect sperm from overly excited males, which can then be used in artificial insemination programs. And no, I'm not kidding. And ultimately, the kakapo is so evolutionarily weird that it almost went extinct just from being bad at existing. And of course from humans showing up with their pesky pointy sticks. And by 1995, there were only 51 left, even though they can live up to 80 years, possibly more.
Goodness.
But thankfully, a conservation program was then set up, which had the first success in years when it came to saving them. However, while it did keep them from going extinct, it wasn't as successful as one might hope. And as
So
of
they're still
2024,
endangered.
there are only 244 kakapo left, with every single one of them being closely monitored and restricted to certain areas. Oh, and they also all have names. But anyways,
Nice.
considering the density of animals made giant around Australia and New Zealand, maybe there's just something in the waters of the Pacific that makes
Most
things grow
definitely.
huge. Because
Most
it's not just
definitely.
here. Take New Caledonia, for example, a French territory east of Australia. This place is home to Rhacodactylus leachianus, also known as the New
Giant
Caledonian
geckos.
giant gecko, the largest gecko in the world. And this thing certainly lives up to its title, being able to grow to 43 centimeters or 17 inches long, and weigh up to 500 grams. Meaning, it's a gecko about the size of a squirrel. And to really put that into perspective, your average house gecko weighs
like
maybe
80.
2 grams. So this guy is 250 times heavier. In fact, not only is it the current largest gecko in the world, it is also the second largest of all time, only being surpassed by the gigantism, a species which, funnily enough, used to live in New Zealand, but actually does come from New Caledonia as well, with it having been possibly 50% longer and several times the weight. And the New Caledonian giant gecko is so big that it routinely eats other lizards, birds, and even small mammals, having a strong enough bite and pointy enough teeth that it can absolutely hurt you if you piss it off. And that's kind of easy considering they're known for being absolutely psychotic in the temperament department, with even their breeding
Yeah, a lot of these
behavior basically
animals are
consisting
a
of
little
first date
psychotic.
where they bite each other and thrash violently, often accompanied with locking jaws. How cute. But hey, if they survive that, I guess that means they're fated. So unsurprisingly, these guys are highly territorial, and they communicate this through a series of growls, chirps, whimpers, and whistles. They sound more like they're coming from well, honestly I have no idea, but certainly not a reptile. And when threatened, they often won't run, they will instead
was
stand
that
their ground,
comment?
make funny noises, and probably fight you. And in fact, they're so aggressive that many cases of cannibalism have been noted, and they're generally chalked up to
So
territorial
they just
defense.
eat each other.
And like some of the other
The
island giants
heck?
we've talked about, these guys are also long-lived, being able to live for decades, with some individuals in captivity having reached 50 years old. Which on the flip side, a house gecko would be lucky to make it a 7. And on their native islands, indigenous Kanak people actually fear them because of an old superstition, which is
Okay.
that the geckos can cling to your body and pull out your soul. And given their size, attitude, and those sounds, I'm not entirely convinced that's just superstition. But like I said, there must be something in the water of the Pacific.
I
As it
think this is
seems
the
like
last one,
entire
right?
region is cursed with gigantism, as no matter where you go, you'll find
W
islands
turtle.
scattered around with animals that have no business being that big. Take the Lord Howe Island stick insect, for example,
Okay,
also
I think
called
this is the
the
last
tree
one.
lobster, which probably tells you everything you need to know. This
Chat, are
thing
we
is as
skipping
thick as
this
your
one?
thumb and longer than your hand, being up to 20 centimeters or 8 inches long and weighing 25 grams or 1 ounce. So likely hundreds of times heavier than your run-of-the-mill stick insect. And what's crazy is that these things were actually thought extinct after rats were introduced in 1918, with them being declared so just 2 years after. But then, decades
Okay.
later, scientists found a dead one on a sea stack known as Ball's Pyramid, which is basically a 500-meter tall rock just jutting out of the ocean. And lo and behold, following a new
They
expedition
had some
to
on
look
that
for them,
island.
a population of fewer than 30 individuals were found, having survived in this vertical, basically barren rock face for 80 years, presumably out of pure spite. But as of 2012, the Melbourne Zoo has successfully bred over 9,000 of them, and thus taken them out at the brink of extinction. And yes, obligatory, it's over 9,000. Now I will mention, we're not exactly sure if this size is a result of insular gigantism, considering
Okay.
it has no closely related
I
mainland
forgot that was like
relatives
the
that we
topic
know
of the video.
so it's hard to say for sure, but let's just assume it is. And speaking of big animals without a spine, we can't forget about the king of island invertebrates himself. And really,
Wait,
king
he's gonna
of
talk about
land
the
invertebrates
crab,
in
right?
general, Burgess latro, i.e. the
Nice, the
coconut
coconut
crab. Now
crab.
this thing is what I'd imagine what
Just
happens.
doesn't look like a
freaking
freaking crab, bro.
Crab, but like a horror movie version. And then doesn't wait for any input. Because first off, these things are huge. And I mean huge.
Goodness.
We're talking over a meter or 3 feet across, and weighing over 4 kilograms or 9 pounds. In other words, more like a small dog with an exoskeleton rather than any
Can
normal
you
kind of
eat
crab.
them?
Well,
Can you eat them? Yes, coconut. Okay, let's see. Strongest grip strength. Although they are in fact edible, there are a couple reasons why you shouldn't eat them. They're a vulnerable species due to people overhunting them. And then the meat can be toxic if the crab has been eating poisonous fruits like sea mangoes. I mean, that's your answer.
technically hermit crab, but still.
Yo, Barney. Barney is hosting a coconut crab mukbang at his house. June 30th. Pull up.
And get this, nowhere is safe from these creatures. As despite being ground dwellers, these crabs made nightmare fuel can climb trees. Yes, trees. And up to 10 meters.
I mean, they got to
or
get to the
30 feet high
coconut
at
somehow,
that.
right?
But that is not all, because of course it isn't. Despite only weighing a fraction of the heaviest animals on land,
It's got
they
the
have
strongest
the strongest
grip
recorded
strength.
grip strength of any terrestrial animal, period.
Yeah.
With a crushing force up to 3,300 newtons, which for reference is about as strong as a lion's bite. And just a reminder, this is again coming from a crab. Well, hermit crab. And they use this power for exactly what you'd expect, or at least what I'd expect. Taking names and kicking butt. And by that, I mean cracking open coconuts, which really shouldn't be that surprising given their name, and being a general menace.
I feel
to
like that's the
society,
obvious
as
thing. They
coconut
have
crabs are
to.
notorious thieves, with their nickname even being the robber crab or palm thief. And they'll steal pretty much anything, but they especially like shiny objects, and there are even
Yeah.
reports of them stealing knives from camps.
What do
And
you need a
apparently this
knife
applies to
for? You got
birds, too,
freaking
as
grip strength
coconut
for
crabs have been
dude.
photographed dragging away full-grown seabirds, which were dead because they killed them. Yeah, vicious. So with all of this said, and having
Okay.
toured a fraction of the world's weirdest islands and meeting their oversized inhabitants, you're probably wondering, why does this keep happening? What is it about islands that make evolution turn Davids into Goliaths? And as it turns out, there are actually several mechanisms at play here, and they all
Just
pretty much
isolation?
work together to synergistically create these island monstrosities.
Okay.
First, there's the predator problem, or rather,
Yeah,
the lack
no
of predator
predators.
problem. You see, on the mainland, being small usually means you can hide better and need less food. But remove those predators, and suddenly being small is less useful, as without anything trying to murder you every 5 seconds, you can afford to get bigger. And being bigger offers a bunch of benefits, including better thermoregulation, meaning you won't freeze to death as easily. And then there's the fact that you can eat food that smaller animals generally can't get or
What are
can't
you
process.
saying?
It also means you can store more tissue for when
What are
times
you
get tough.
saying, bro?
But of course,
You're
a lot
gonna
of
have to
it
find somebody else for that stupid idea.
is also driven by internal competition, as being bigger means you can fight off competitors for the best territories and mates, which thus snowballs into bigger and bigger offspring. And sometimes the change starts before natural selection even gets involved, with something called the founder effect, which in this case is when a few individuals are able to better colonize an island in the first place, and thus their genetic quirks
Sign them up for the NBA.
The island itself also matters, with smaller islands generally pushing species to more extreme changes quicker.
Yeah.
As fewer species, limited resources, and isolated gene pools crank up the evolutionary pressure into overdrive. But perhaps the most important factor of them all is the ecological release. You see, when you're on an island, entire ecological niches might be completely empty, which results in the arrivals picking up niches they're already occupied on the mainland. For example, if there are no large herbivores, birds might become moas. No mammalian predators, eagles become hoss eagles.
Yeah.
No one competing for coconuts, crabs become nightmare fuel. Now overall, it would seem that island gigantism is pretty much a uniformly good thing, considering the advantages it gives. But that's not exactly the case.
That's nightmare
And
fuel,
here's where
though.
things get a bit depressing. You see, being a giant on an island is great, until it suddenly and catastrophically isn't. Island giants have one fatal flaw. Well, one big
They're
fatal
unique.
flaw. They evolved in a bubble. No predators means less fear, less competition means no competitive arms race, and no serious threat means less defense mechanisms beyond being big. So when humans show up, and we always do, these giants basically become walking buffets with eat me signs strapped to their backs. I mean, take a look at the moas, gone within 100 years. Hoss eagle, starved shortly after.
Starved
The dodo
because
and
they were all
solitaire,
yeah.
deleted. The Tenerife giant rat, gone. In fact, an overwhelming number of animals with insular gigantism are either extinct or near extinct, and this is likely a trend which will
That
continue to
sucks.
happen for these island giants. But I will mention to something I alluded to, which is
I
the
imagine
island rule
there's
doesn't
like
have to
there's
make things
animals
big.
probably
It can
like
also
on
make big things
Antarctica
smaller, and that is why the island of Flores had
or like
both
in the
giant
ocean and
rats
stuff.
and tiny humans. But that is a topic for another video. But regardless, the main takeaway is perhaps that islands make evolution act, well, weird. Give it isolation, remove some pressure, add some weird constraints, and suddenly you've got crabs that can climb trees and crack coconuts, insects the size of mice, and pigeons that forgot how to fly, and probably how to poop on statues as well. Thanks for watching, and until next time.
Alrighty. W video. Honestly, shout out Barney. That was actually a pretty good video to watch. I'm not gonna lie. We're definitely probably gonna end up watching more videos like that. So let me know in the comments. I mean, if you guys don't mess with it, then probably not. We'll just leave it as a stream thing. Speaking of stream thing, make sure to follow Twitch, StoryofMike with 2 eyes, and sub to the channel. I mean, you're at the end of the video. You might as well hit the sub button. It's like it's gonna be right there. So like, just click it. See y'all. Peace.